Morning guys, this is Paulo from Celine's Loft. Today we're gonna do a loft visit to the guy that doesn't need introduction in the Philippines, Pigeon Racing, Emmanuel Go. I'm with my cousins, Eugene, Arnold, Gerald Catan, BBC coordinator.
What's up, man?
Hello. For Emmanuel Go.
Diet sila.
Nice to meet you.
Uy, nice to meet you too. Halika,
My cousin. Tapos, barkada ko sa Pampanga.
Okay. Okay, tuloy kayo. Halika. I'm Manny Go from the Philippines, a pigeon fancier. And that's my real passion, but I'm an importer and a distributor of livestock equipment here in the Philippines, but pigeon is really my passion, you know. I like breeding and I like competing because it brings out the competitive side of me. And shout out to my kababayans, US, of course. I worked for an animal genetic company for 13 years, and we really focus on progressive breeding. At saka yung talagang very scientific ang approach. So yun talagang ano.
So, how long have you been flying? Or racing?
I started in 2009, I think. I started racing competitively in 2011.
Okay. PHA?
Initially it was with another club.
Okay.
Pero I partnered with somebody, and then after that, my good friend Johnson encouraged me to to parang rent yung space niya dun sa taas.
Okay.
And then that's the time when I flew sa PHA. And then I stopped briefly for around 5 years in 2015, I think. And then 2019 ako bumalik.
Okay.
And then yun na.
First year? How was the first year?
This is not the first year.
No, I mean your first year.
First year, I think I already won it.
Wow.
First year. Pero officially, yung first year namin was with another good friend, which is from China, Stephen. We flew together, and then we won, fortunately. And then the next year, naghiwalay na kami ulit. Naglilipad siya ng sarili niya, and then I also flew mine. Parang ganun, ibang loft na sa kanya. Ganun.
So, here's where you breed.
No, well, these are for the pumpers. Ito yung mga fosters ko.
Foster pair.
Pero kasi, I can show you if you like.
Please. Wow, the trophies.
Pero, so I try to keep it as quiet as possible. And as you can see, the space is really limited.
Yeah.
So Pero pagdating sa breeding kasi I would prefer that my, I have a direct supervision over yung breeding. Because I'm very particular with the quality of the youngsters, the preparation. Of course, months prior to breeding, I already try to assess yung merits ng bawat breeders, and then I try to imagine, and of course it's always what you try to aim is progressive breeding. And when you do that, it's also important that you try to mate birds that would either complement or that would correct a weakness that you see in a particular bird.
So you correct the weakness?
Oh, definitely. These are athletes, so you have to be very particular with, of course, phenotype plays a big role in that. Because again, they're athletes, so you try to correct weaknesses in traits that you think is not necessarily that would make them a strong athlete. So you try to correct that. And of course, you have to have a very good understanding of the terrain and the weather condition that you fly in, because these factors would play a role in the right type of birds that you breed for that particular race.
So, do you believe in horses for courses?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, for example, if I try to fly a bird that's typically good in endurance but not necessarily strong or fast on the wings, and you fly that in Pattaya, what you can get is probably good positioning in the ace but not really good in terms of the laps. But especially for OLRs, where they put a lot of emphasis and the prizes really goes to the important races, this is something which you have to consider. You have to be, it's a lot of common sense. If you want to win, you should be able to be competitive in that arena. You just don't send birds blindly. And
so you select your birds. So how do you select your young birds to send to one Loft races?
Well, it depends. But for example, for harder races, I would probably be very particular with buoyant type birds.
Number one.
I would probably prefer birds, females, for example. Although I have a family of birds that are very strong on the
cock section.
The cocks. But these come quite, I would say 8 out of 10 families you would probably find stronger females, especially on the longer distances. But there are certain families which seems like the males fly better. I would also try to avoid birds that are quite excitable, because those actually would be...
You want the calm birds, or?
For high stressors or environments with high stressors, probably that would be a trait that you would be looking for, because it's
like when you put them on the crate, you see them calm, not fighting.
Not just that, but sometimes, because families or birds that are very typically dominant, especially on the males, that can be, that can attribute unnecessary stressors, because they would want to fight with everyone else. And that's also the reason why females in general are easier to come to condition, because they they just fly well, they eat well, they rest well, while males would usually prefer to fight. They would, things like that, simple things that might probably add a bit to the edge that you hope you will be able to get.
Okay. So here's where Emmanuel go breed.
These this sections would actually be converted to breeding
Okay.
area, where we put in the nest boxes during breeding season, and each section would have 6 pairs. So the nest boxes are taken out after the breeding.
This is the hens, right?
Yeah, these are hens. They're off now because they're heavy in molt. And we keep them a bit light at this time.
Look at those feather qualities.
Yeah. You should come in.
Oh yeah. They're beautiful, right?
Yeah. They should be glossy and really, this time medyo ano yan.
Look at the droppings.
Droppy and all.
Droppings are dry. solid. Very nice.
You mentioned that you want to go with
Yeah.
winner. Yeah, maybe you can.
You winner or your super breeder? If
let's try a
Yeah.
few
It's up to you.
winners first.
Video.
Yeah. These are the females, so obviously we'll be handling a few females, and then the males are upstairs, so probably I'll get a few males
Okay.
in a while.
You name your birds, right?
Oh, all of them, because I'm very poor in remembering numbers.
Yeah.
They're usually very
Tame.
calm. In fact, they would come to you when you call them,
Really?
and they would even pair with you. They're very, I call them very broody hens, and they're very.
So, who's this hen?
This is my last winner in the North Derby races. She's the only one out of, I think, more than 2,000 birds that with 7 points, and she was champion in two laps. This is Blue Destiny.
This Blue Destiny. I'm holding Blue Destiny, guys. That's okay. Very balanced. Buoyant. Bro, okay lang bang mahawakan ng kaibigan ko?
Sige, go ahead.
Blue Destiny. So what's the record on Blue Destiny?
I can show you later. Basta she won 2 laps, champion, and then she's the only bird with 7 points in the last North Derby races. That was in 2024, and I think her record is quite impressive actually.
Very consistent.
Yep, and the closest in terms of points is I think more than 1,000 points outright.
And
the closest bird to her.
What's the bloodline of Blue Destiny?
She would be a granddaughter of Blue Hope and a daughter of the direct Ganus bird. This is Sublime Imara, which is my
Look at
first
those
overall.
I like that.
First overall hen naman sa South Derby races. She was an hour and a half earlier than the second bird.
Breakaway first.
Yeah, broke away. You can notice that they're not as buoyant now.
This
but
one's
when
not.
they're flying. Yeah,
That one.
yeah, but when they're flying, they have to be very
Oh, yeah.
buoyant. They have to be very buoyant when they're flying.
So do you feed barley when flying?
Oh, yeah, but depends. Depends on the time of the race, and depends on the body condition of the bird. It's not really just barley, but it's the purative mix. It's a mixture of a few grains, but basically it's light feeding. But we mix that with our formula for the races, just to make them a bit lighter. Hindi masyado. Hindi ako masyadong sa yung tinatawag na strong back.
Yeah.
Although of course we want them sound. Ayoko naman yung pag binuksan mo nakaganyan. But hindi criteria sa akin yung ganun na ganun ang buntot. Nakikita ko yan more on sa mga sprinters and yung mga talagang putok.
And you don't have to open the legs to get that straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sa akin basta importante sound.
You don't
Gusto
have
ko
to open the
matibay.
legs to...
Gusto ko matibay kasi yung mga ibang ibon ko na winners ko hindi sila necessarily ganyan. Although katulad nga ng sabi natin, we constantly improve on the quality of the birds that we produce.
Oh.
So kailangan i-improve natin. Kung may nakikita tayong weakness, i-improve natin. Actually, there's quite a few winners here. This one is second overall, the silver one, in the South Derby races.
Oh, you fly off collar too?
But I try to limit.
Yeah.
Because once you have too many, it's very hard to
How
control
many
the
birds
quality.
do you fly? Like each season?
For the North Derby,
young bird, right?
young bird, right.
Okay.
For the North Derby, average is about 30.
Here.
For the North Derby races, the average is about 30, but this year I'm flying a little more, 40. For
40,
South,
40 young birds.
yeah.
Okay.
For South, it's usually it's usually 30 to 40 birds, but this year I'm flying more. Ano kasi, we have to admit and to consider the factor of where we have so many, for example, losses.
Yeah.
Because of factors we don't want to mention anymore. But, and so I think at the end of the day, people with a bit more to fly would have some sort of some leverage.
Here. Doon ba sa kabila, bro?
Oh, I'll put it there.
Oh.
No. Puta lang.
You talk to your birds, huh?
I do. When they're quiet kasi when they know once we have visitors, parang ang restless sila eh. This is another type of bird, but this bird also flew very well. She was actually a
Were you breeding
contender.
this in?
Huh?
Were you breeding this in?
She's from my breeding, but I bred her this season. She's
Long past it.
yeah, but she's a daughter of one of my better breeders already, Conquistador. She's a half brother to Duncan, the one that won in Victoria Falls. She was actually very consistent up to Catbalogan. She
How
was
many
already
kilometers?
Catbalogan is about 500, I think, from here to Catbalogan, and
It's
then
like a middle distance.
middle, but you know, in the Philippines, it's not straight. You know, from one point to the other point, it's not straight. So, to us here, and also because of the challenges in in as far as the wind, in as far as the weather, in as far as the terrain, you know, you have mixed, you know, you have mountains, you have the sea, you have and all that. We feel that a middle distance bird here might actually be, or the distance we fly, 500, is actually long distance already for other countries.
Wow.
If in the last lap, kasi she missed the clock by about 30 minutes. If she did clock in the Tacloban lap, she should have been second overall young bird. Unfortunately, she was only able to get 8th overall.
And she's a off-caller.
Yeah, and her two full siblings both finished in the MacArthur race this year. Full sibs, yeah.
So what's your main bloodline?
Okay, that's pretty. I breed more on the type rather than a bloodline. You know, one.
Or
thing,
you call it your own bloodline now? Cause
at one point in time, you need to be able to brand your bird.
Yeah.
You know, it's no different than what the Europeans do.
Oh,
You know, you know, for example,
it's like
you say,
Gabby Vandenberg.
yeah, it's a mixture of all lines.
yeah.
You know, but at the end of the day, when
It's yours.
Yeah, it's mine. So,
Yeah.
There's a big difference between, you know, actually when you breed, or the breeder, does have a big influence over the quality and the type of bird that comes along, you know. Because even a very good bird can easily be gone in terms of its genetic merits in the next generation, you know. If you breed blindly, if you don't know what you're doing, you don't have breeding plans, then eventually that's gone, you know. So I think a breeder would have definitely earned that right to call or to own that bird as his own. I'll maybe get a couple of cocks.
Okay.
Rex, ayan po. Kunin mo yung isang lalagyan doon. Kuha lang naman yung
Bro, so, tanong ko lang sa'yo, yung barley is different pag may buoyant bird ka talaga, di ba?
Yes.
Di ba?
Again, it depends on the ratio. Saka depende on the body condition of the bird. Iba kasi ang requirements.
Kasi I know for a fact, Birds don't like barley.
Yep.
The pigeons don't like barley.
Yeah, they
Right?
try to leave it behind, you know. So you can also feed strategically. For example, during off season, in the morning we only feed the purative mix, so they don't chew. Basically, that's all that they can eat, and or vice versa. And then in the afternoon we feed them our breeder mix. If you mix it together, normally
fight their appetite.
Yeah.
Right.
If you mix it together, normally they would choose the more appetizing ones first, and then they leave the barley behind. But that's also an indication that they're overfed.
You're overfeeding. Yep. Okay.
Rick, halika, kuha lang tayo. Wait, I'm just kidding. You know, I basically took 3 generations of cocks, and the purpose of which is just to show you the progression from one generation to the other.
Okay.
These are all winners, but although of course maybe, you know, at the end of the day genetics is the most important still.
Same parents?
It came basically the foundation breeders are the same, but you know it's a son and then a grandson and then a great grandson.
That's your bloodline.
Right. And so the purpose really is to show you the progression of the development, especially of phenotype. Okay, because this is also to emphasize that there's no such thing as a perfect bird. And so the purpose of which is to acknowledge, first of course, you have to understand the terrain that you're flying in, the demands of the race, and of course understanding the traits of your bird, what they're strong at or what their weak points are, and then you try to correct on that. And then from the succeeding generations, then you continually do that and do that and do that. No? The first I'll show you is Conquer Dream.
Conquer Dream.
Right.
There you go. There you go, guys.
Oops. Visually, you can easily see that he's quite a big bird. Okay?
Yeah. Wow.
He's quite a big bird because he
But
would
he's
have.
buoyant.
Yep. When he was flying, he was really buoyant. But now
Oh, you
he's
flew
not.
this bird?
Oh, yeah. He was 6th overall, I think, in the South Derby.
Conquer Dream.
Conquer Dream.
I'm holding Conquer Dream. Wow.
Okay, but this guy already produced at least 5 winners already.
From the children and grandchildren?
Oh no, I'm only talking of the immediate generation or the progenies, which are the children. I have a 2nd overall, which is the solo 2K winner for the North Derby races.
Wow.
I also have a 3rd overall, and I also have a 7th overall, and not to mention the 2K winners and the superset winners. Just on the children.
So he's a foundation breeder and a
Well, the family.
Oh, okay.
Because the 2 sisters that we kept also produced 1st overalls, both of those sisters. So they're this is what I call, in as far as genetic merits, they're very prepotent. Okay? But let's try to dissect them a bit. Okay? Obviously, for the Philippine scenarios, kasi, they're not very ideal because they're quite big. And the reason I say, personally, I do not favor very big birds under Philippine conditions because for the simple fact that, you know, we have rain, we have the temperatures can really go extreme, no? And even the weather. And for a big bird, for example, you're flying and competing, and then they along the way there's rain and all that, because of course he would have bigger surface area. So he would basically carry more in as far as extra weight because of the water that, you know, seeps into his feathers. Right? And of course, when you have extra size, of course, this is the difference between a big bird but that is buoyant and a big bird that is heavy.
Yeah.
The latter is basically useless for me. For me, it's basically useless because my belief is that anything extra is a liability. So I try to keep that at a minimum. But again, the challenge is to be able to produce really, birds that would fly well. But more importantly, I think you always have to think of the next generation, because if you're a real good breeder, you don't just breed on a year-to-year basis. Basically, what you do is you plan ahead. In fact, when I keep females, or I breed, I already have in mind the next, or my breedings for the next 2 or 3 years.
You already got that.
Yeah, you have to have that, because that's progressive breeding. Okay, so as you can see, he's quite big, and although they're very strong, even the brothers and sisters are winners as well. But I think they're better breeders than flyers.
Is he your foundation or?
Well, he's becoming a foundation, because the father now, Emperor, I've not bred him.
How old is Emperor?
He's about 6 or 7. No, 7, probably 7 or 8. But I've not used him for 2 years already. I only breed him when I need a sister from this line,
Okay.
a female, because, for example, the sister of this guy, Infinity and the Legenda, they're both 5 years old already. So next year, I'm not really keen on using them anymore. So I need a younger version of Infinity. So I have one that's 3 years old, I have one that's 2 years old, and I have 2 that's turning, that's yearly. That will turn yearly.
You're already keeping stock for...
Because those hens, and they're also been selected.
Do you prove those stocks, or do you just stock the bird? Do you fly those birds?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Of course, ideally you fly birds.
Yeah,
but
so you pick the good ones.
Well, that's another way of selecting. But selecting a breeder has totally different parameters as to when you're selecting one that's for flying. But of course, a competition bird, basically whatever you breed, you fly. Unless, of course, that bird has very obvious flaws, then you call early.
Oh yeah.
But of course, if you have a winner, normally you would use that as a breeder. But if I were to grade the merits of the birds in my loft, the highest in terms of genetic merits, or in other words, in terms of value for me, would be the producers of good producers, not just producers of good flyers.
So, do you believe in skipping the generation?
Well, that depends. When you say skipping the generation, do you mean like, one pair is paired to the other? And
No. Like, a young bird flying, and then bird 1 have the baby, but this baby didn't win anything. But the next one, do you believe in that? The next one will be good.
It's probable, but
Last chance.
okay. I would answer that in a different manner.
Okay.
The age of the hen to me is very important. I like to keep my hens young, especially the hens that produce the flyers or the competition birds. So I would say that the peak time that the bird produces very good flyers would be from ages 2 to 4. Okay? If in those peak years, that hen is not able to produce well, she's already gone.
She's out.
Not out, but I cull birds.
You don't sell them.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
There are a few that I would consider. For example, funny you ask, but the closest of people that knows my style of breeding, they're actually waiting for my 5, 6, 7-year-old hen.
Wow.
Because although they know, and I'm very open in saying that, I would usually recommend that, especially for hens that you use to produce your flyers or your competition birds, I would prefer hens in their peak, which is at 2 to 5. But when they're 6 years old, normally I would retire them already, unless they're exceptional. Maybe I would take still. But their children are downgraded already. In such, for example, when they're in their 2nd or 3rd year, they would produce. I would be comfortable putting the money bands in those hens.
Yeah.
But when they're 5 or 6, when they're 5 or 6 years old, I would usually use the cheaper ones already.
Yeah.
Because not because of the genetic merits has decreased or is less in value, but because of their vigor in producing competition birds, then I would usually put those the progenies of those hens in the less important leg bands already.
So you trust the birds. You trust those birds.
There's no question I trust the genetics behind them.
Uh-huh.
But there's a difference between producing sound birds and producing birds that's probably just that maybe are good for breeding or are not good at all.
Okay.
You know?
I get that.
Okay, so this is the son.
Next one. The sun.
The son of he's heavy in bone. This is the son of Conquer Dream. He's the third overall winner. Again, he flew in a very hard races then. He got third overall. This is Conquistador. This is the sire of Duncan, and also the sire of Poderosa, the Grizzle one.
Yeah.
In his first year alone, I only made 2 hens to him, and both produced winners.
Like the same size.
Not, well, size-wise, this is definitely much bigger.
Yeah,
The
but-
sire. He's a bit more tamed already, if you
Uh-huh.
know what I mean. He's a bit smaller on the size, and I like his buoyancy better
Oh,
than
yeah.
I would like the sire, no?
Very cool.
So he would be easier to use already as a breeder, because I'm not really, unlike for example with Dream, I cannot pair him to a medium plus hen.
Mm-hmm.
I also cannot mate him to a hen that's not really exceptional on the buoyancy,
Mm-hmm.
but he's got excellent bone. So even if I mate him to really small hens, that the resulting progenies are actually much improved. In fact, the dam of this cock is so small, and she's heavily inbred. And if you look at her, you know that she's not really a looker, but after mating those 2, they produce really good birds.
Intelligent.
Look at that.
Nice.
Okay. Now this is a 3rd generation already.
The grandson.
The grandson, but this is out of a daughter of
Okay.
Dream Naman. Okay, you know this is what's good about
So
Dream.
it's a line bred.
Not really, because I'm not, you know, the sire of this one is not related to these guys,
Oh, okay.
but the type of bird is the same.
Okay.
Because
okay.
I focus on toughness, on homing, and long distance traits. So the type is the same, but the line or the breed or the genetics behind is not.
So this is what you need to win in the Philippines. This kind of birds.
Now, this guy actually flew under 2 clubs in Pampanga.
Okay.
This is the one, ito yung nilipad ni Marvin.
Marvin and Julia.
He won, he was competing against, I think, more than 6,000 birds.
Okay.
He competed in the South Derby races, and he's the solo clocker for young birds in the last lap. This is my personal man.
Okay. This is the personal band.
Cosa.
Royalties.
Cosa at saka BBC. He was a solo clocker for young birds. Actually, there was also another clocker, old bird yung isang nag-clock, ano? Tapos pero sa young bird siya lang.
Opo, siya po.
He was competing with against 6,000 birds, and he was the only one to complete that in the young birds in Tacloban. And he is also a champion in may champion pa to sa isang lap eh.
Sa ano po, sa PUF yan.
Oh, pero may isa siyang club ano to eh, lap champion. Hindi ko alam kung
Sa Cosa po.
oo.
Ano, yan
Anong
yung nakakuha
tat-
ng sasakyan.
Hindi
po yan.
Although hindi ko alam kasi yung premyo hindi ko naman kinuha. Basta usapan namin ibalik lang yung ibon.
So you let them fly it for you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
But you bred this bird.
Yep. Yep. So again, you can see some progression in as far as the phenotype.
Mm-hmm.
This would be, he would have a better muscle than the father,
Mhm.
but you know I would keep it. This is the max that I would go for in as far as phenotype. But of these 3, I've always kept soundness in as far as, because I like the the humerus short, and I also like it thick. Okay, because I think there's power in there. You know, I hate birds with very long humerus. This one, arm. That's one thing I don't like. I like to keep the feather quality as soft as possible. You see, there's very least resistance, but not too soft. But it has to be sound because there's least resistance as far as the feather quality is concerned. Of course, I believe that as an athlete, you need to have very good bones. Because because that at the end of the day, you know, that gives you that power. And I like to keep the sizes medium, because if you were to compare the son to the grandson to the grandfather, they're definitely better in size than the grandfather, because Dream is a bit big.
Right.
So when I pair Dream, I would always have to make sure that I choose the smallest of hens.
Hence, yeah.
Because I don't like producing bigger ones. That's one thing I need to correct. For the son, I need to improve a bit on the muscle quality, but still keep it as buoyant as possible.
I like it.
This one, I think, is close to the type that I like, but of course you cannot, you know, the next challenge is to find a pair that would further complement it. Now this
So
year,
you bred this cock this year?
Yeah.
So it's gonna fly this year.
Yeah. In fact, there's a daughter that's flying now in Victoria Falls.
Ah.
Yeah.
Congrats on your Victoria Falls.
Oh, last year, thank you.
Yeah.
But I hope we do better this year. Now, I took this.
Did you
bird.
get that bird back?
No, I
Not
didn't.
yet.
Because the real purpose there is that I actually, I wanted to let go of that because I was wanting to see who would be interested to buy the bird, and of course, you know, there's always that excitement of knowing that you're the first, or I don't know if I would, you know, at least one of the few ones that was able to buy or to sell a bird out of the Pipa auction site. And you know, I was hoping it would go much higher, but maybe if we do well again this year, maybe the price. Okay, this is again going back to genetics. You mentioned a while ago about horses for courses, right? This is not a typical bird that I would prefer for the Philippines, but this guy I bought particular, and it's a big investment for the Pattaya for next year. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And he's not in peak condition yet. He's not in peak condition. If he really matures, because he's only about 6 months old, 6 to 7 months old.
You didn't breed this yet.
No. This year I invested heavy for my Pattaya entries in 2026-27. So I'm preparing for that. So this year, hi Lloyd.
This bird's solid.
But
buoyant.
more importantly, yep.
But buoyant.
That's a trait that I really
Yeah.
like. And he's not really big. He's just muscular, but he's not
flying
really
in California.
Yeah.
He'll go flying.
But
solid,
Yeah.
buoyant, feather quality. Look at
Yep.
that.
and he's a very relaxed boy. Yeah. I like him. I like this. This one. Again, so I invested heavy on genetics for Pattaya in 2026, and I'm hoping we can do a bit better. I flew last year in Pattaya. We did relatively okay. No, so 2 years already.
2 years.
2 years already. In fact, the first year a son of Dream and a brother of Conquistador got 73rd ace pigeon in Pattaya, but the last season we didn't do as good. But you know, my pigeons are flying true to their type. They're really flying. You know, they all clock up to the last lap, up to 600 kilometers, but they're just not fast enough. So I needed to take a few fast birds that I think can work very well there, proven, and I hope I can also utilize for under Philippine conditions. So I really focused on not the typical European bird, but because this one is from Kuwait. The line's from Kuwait. And the other one that I bought is actually from Germany. Germany also are known to have very tough birds, but also they can fly flat.
So do you do any one loft races locally, like here in the Philippines?
Not yet. Not really.
Yet.
No, not really.
Just international.
Well, it's the rewards I think is more attractive and the competition level.
Yeah.
But this is not to say that the birds locally are not. Definitely, we have very good birds locally. In fact, I've always been a real believer of the genetics in the Philippines. It's just that, let's put it this way, we invest really heavy. And I think I would have, because I don't have that many birds.
Yeah.
And I don't want to tax my birds breeding unlimited, and then just be able to put birds in all the competition or the one loft. So I have to choose which lofts or which competitions I like to participate
So
in.
how many pairs do you keep?
Generally, I have 30 pairs.
30 pairs, that's it.
Yeah. Of course, plus or minus.
Mhm.
But like, for example, in January, I would have more because I have a few
In
pairs.
foster pair.
Yeah, I have a few pairs that are only for the North Derby races. But come south, then that's where I only breed the birds I think are really, those that would have a good chance of winning in the South Derby races. So a lesser for, and this is where my pampers or my fosters would come very important because they take care of my important.
Yeah. Emmanuel bought this apartment just to build a loft over there. Wow! Alright, here it is. The main event.
Main event.
How many floors?
4 floors, well, 5 floors.
5 floors.
And 6 rooms, but basically 2 rooms are utilized by my people, but the rest are vacant. But I'm not renting it out.
May loftman ka din dito, bro?
Yeah, here I have, 2.
2 loftmen here.
Yeah, I have a loft manager and
At home?
And then basically there's a third guy which does dual job. So 3 people here.
Wow.
This is supposed to be 2 rooms, but I've giniba ako na yan and I'm converting it to like a semi-breeding.
Yeah.
So it will extend up to here.
This is the guy to beat here.
No. We have so many good fanciers here.
Oh, I believe you.
I bred those red ones are foster. Those are foster. You can see they're quite big. I imported, they call it the British show razor. This one, this guy.
Yeah. Ginagamit mo silang foster?
Not this guy because he's
okay.
not as good. Pero he was crossed with local racing birds, and then those are the ones that are going to become foster. And I think those are going to be very good fosters guys. Pero super guapo yan, tinan mo yung itsura.
Oo, pogi eh.
Oo. Okay, akyat tayo.
Wow, another one. Let's go.
When I bought this, it was like 4 floors lang.
Woo!
There's veranda here. So
We're in heaven.
basically,
We're in Pigeon heaven.
we converted the whole floor to a pigeon loft.
This is Royalties loft. Bro, grabe loft mo ah.
Well,
Amazing.
Like you, I'm just a crazy pigeon fancier. So
Alright.
it's been a long time being bred, but the real dream is to be able to put up a really good breeding facility. Because those are the most important to me, my breeders.
No draft here.
No.
No draft.
Ventilation is very important. So it has to be controlled.
So
in a
this is
manner-
your landing board.
Yeah. No, this is my trap door.
Uh-huh.
Landing board is basically the one on
The whole
top.
thing, yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing. Okay.
At the landing board. Go in here.
Nice. Do you separate cocks and hens?
Yes, we do, but they're not separated yet. They're not
Okay.
sexed yet at this
Uh-huh.
time, because we've just completed on our south birds.
You're almost done.
Actually, we're done already. So next week, he would separate the south from the north birds already. These are the youngest. So basically, they're batched according to age.
Oh, okay.
These ones are still being trained. They're loft flied at least daily, but they're. I think they should be. You know,
Settled?
yeah. These are settled already.
Mm-hmm. So that's the aviary. This is where they rest. Wow.
This is the waiting area. This is where we wait, and the loft one is upstairs. Someone when we're competing. We also take out that one.
Uh-huh.
That's the viewing deck. I don't know if you can call it that. It's movable, so it's easy for us to Aaron, pwede pakitulak yung yung parang aviary mo para lang makita nila na nagagalaw ito. Tapos punta lang doon. Hindi ba tapos na ba lahat ito? Okay na sila lahat? Tapos na tinutuluan? Okay na, okay na.
Bro, ang sarap mag-abang dito ah.
Yeah. Pag parating.
Yeah.
Pag north, dyan
Dito.
galing. Pag south, usually dito. Pero, itong last season namin na south, lahat ng ibon galing dun.
Umiikot.
Umiikot. Lalo yung lumayo na, galing na doon, galing na ng norte yung ibon. Umiikot na. Kung minsan nakaganon kami lahat, tapos biglang magugulat kami, biglang gaganyan, galing na dun.
Ano yan? Do you use any droppers?
No, I don't think it's quite popular in the Philippines. I don't
Okay.
see anyone using that. Parang istorbo eh, parang lalong so I don't know.
Hindi kasi the birds have more fly in them.
Uh-huh.
Diba? Yung ibang fancier.
Pag longer distances though,
You don't need it.
no,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Straight na lang.
Oh, saka the birds are trained in such a manner na pagdating nila when the loft man blows a whistle, alam nila kaagad they would run in. So we don't need droppers really.
How big is your loft?
This is 24 by 18, I think.
24 by 18.
Right. Each section inside would be 6 by 8. And it would have at least 32 perches. No. Around 40 perches. But I would usually put in maximum of about 30
Okay.
birds.
With extra purchase.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely you have to have extras. You don't want to stress your birds,
Overcrowd.
having to. Yeah, definitely. That's one of the first that I really avoid. I don't like seeing my birds stressed like that. They have to have their own purchase every time. They should like, the living conditions inside the loft to be able to like coming home. At least that's what I think. If they're constantly stressed, then you can't expect them to really come into condition as good as when they're really in a good loft. When I say good loft, it doesn't mean to be, or it doesn't have to be a grand loft. Even a simple loft is okay, for as long as they're comfortable.
Twenty 25 young birds. Right?
Yep. I need to change my logo. The oldest ones are the ones on the
They're
first
done.
section.
They're done molting.
Yeah, they would be around
January.
4 months, a little over 4 months. Those are all hatched late January to early Feb. These ones. And as you can see, we actually pulled the feather in the last,
Yeah.
the 9th and
You're
the
almost
10th.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw it.
It's
Really.
just synchronized well, where next week they will be banded already. We have to bring them to the club to be registered, and then after that we can start letting them loft fly. And that's also the perfect time where the 9th and the 10th would almost be complete.
So do you start training when they're done?
Not until they're
everyone.
loft flying for at least an hour.
Okay.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
Here, we can take that.
Oh.
This is our Ero, nasa yung young bird mix natin? Ito ba?
Oh, yan.
This is our young bird mix.
Is that for molting or just regular?
This is regular, pero we do add may ano to, no? May halo itong depurative dito. Pahingi ng depurative. Basically this ano to? Ito yung flyer mix o ito yung breeder mix?
Yung breeder.
May halong breeder to, no?
Oo.
Wala kang purong flyer lang.
Yung may ano, may depurative na.
Wala. Yung breeder mix lang. Ito may halo ito eh.
Oh,
But basically this is a mix of flyer and
Breeder.
some protein concentrate, so the protein level is a bit higher. In fact, when during this age, I think up to around 5 or 6 months, I still would like to give them higher protein levels, but to control the weight sometimes I would give them or add a bit of depurative mix.
Barley.
Barley, palay, a bit of Milo.
Okay. It's like, is that like 50% barley or 70?
Maybe less, because the what do you call pala in English? Rice paddy.
Yeah.
No, is it rice paddy? Yeah, it's rice paddy. I think you have equal parts of rice paddy and barley, and then of course a bit of Milo, both the white and the red one, and you
Long
know,
bean.
basically this is a light feed, and we use this to control the weight of the birds. Just to control the weight of the birds, and also to control the, you know, when we're starting pointing the birds, we also use this to basically control that. Because if you give them too much, you know, protein, carbs, and all that soon or too soon, then the birds might actually start peaking too early.
Oh, okay.
So it's just a matter of you know, strategy in the way you handle the birds, and that includes when we start loft flying the birds, how often, when we start, you know, forcing them a bit to fly longer hours, you know, and then when we start training them already to hone on those homing traits and all.
How far do you take your birds for training?
That depends, but the farthest would be around 80.
80?
80 is okay. 80, I don't think we're doing 100. Maybe 80.
You don't go to the first lap?
No, it's too far. And you know, once when we're priming the birds, when we're selecting the birds, we're very, very unforgiving in that. You know, we call heavy if we need to, but when they're already in competition, of course we have to give them the best care possible, and we don't take unnecessary risk already. It doesn't make sense for me. It doesn't make sense. So, you know, everything has to be well thought of. Everything has to be well planned.
So if the bird gets sick, do you still medicate that bird or you get rid of that bird?
In competition,
Yeah.
if the bird, if a sickness is one that we can treat, of course we'll medicate.
Okay. But you
I try
separate
not-
that bird?
Yeah, well, it depends again. Before, when we don't have a very good vaccine, especially for adeno, what I do is that once we're sure that a bird is infected, because I want to get the immunity or the titer of that disease or that virus in my birds, I would actually infect all the birds. So we
You
have
take that dropping.
yeah, we take droppings and we dilute it a bit, and then we basically drop it in the
And
nostril.
they get sick.
They get infected, but not all would manifest would show manifestations
Yeah.
of the sickness. But you get this percentage that basically you're sure that the birds are getting infected,
Yeah.
and you will see some pigeons that would actually show that the infection, and easily on the droppings, you would see a lot of pigeons, what's it?
Watery droppings.
Water droppings. They would puke and
The
things like
nose,
that.
the
Yeah.
waddles.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the best way for you, and because I know how to treat that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the purpose of that is that so that we don't have to medicate for a long time.
But you gotta know how to treat that bird.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not that complicated. It's what's important is you know how to treat, so that you treat them and get them back to condition the soonest time possible with the least damage, as far as treatment is concerned. Because you have to be very particular with the care of the liver, because once it's damaged, there's nothing much you can do about it. So we're very careful with that.
Do you use any probiotics?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
But more importantly, I try to keep the use of antibiotics as minimal as possible, and try to use natural remedies. Not when I say natural, it's not just herbal ones that we just pick out from.
Yeah.
But like for example, I think a good product would be the yellow drops.
I use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Herbots.
Yeah, from Herbots. That's the best because they have the right chemical composition in that. It's not really chemical, but I think it's iodine based, and it's very good. I also have an immune booster supplement that I get from China, which I give them. But most important is the vaccine. You have to
Vaccine.
give them very good vaccines to get that immunity going. Like last year, with very good vaccines, I didn't get any young bird disease at all last year. Would you like to hold a few?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Aaron, pahawak ng ilan, kung ano bahala. Mga ganyan. Bahala ka na kung ano pahawak mo sa kanila.
Gusto kong mahawakan niya yung mga buoyant birds para...
Okay. Pag ngayon, hindi pa sila buoyant this time eh.
Yung kaninang buoyant, ganun yung sinasabi ko sa'yo, below na parang
Ano yan eh?
balloon.
Ganito gawin mo pag gusto mong malaman na buoyant yung ibon mo, pag humuli ka. Pero hindi yung pag nagbe-breed na sila, kasi kung minsan nagbe-breed medyo bumibigat ng konti eh. Pero pag yung pangarera mo, pag hinawakan mo, pikit mo mata mong gano'n, kung minsan halos wala kang, parang pakiramdam wala kang
hawak.
bit-bit. Wala kang bit-bit.
Parang papel.
Paano nangyayari ganun?
Minsan nasa genetics eh.
Oo, nasa lahi pa rin.
Nasa genetics eh.
Ito pero kasi
meron akong breeder, pero lang, cock and hen.
Oo.
They're both
very
buoyant.
buoyant. Oo.
Kahit pangatlong clutch, same
Oo.
bakali.
Ito, ano sila, hindi lumilipad. Kaya ngayon medyo pakiramdam mo mabigat. Okay. Sorry.
Good.
Parang may video.
Oh yeah.
Sa hen. Sa inahin siguro.
Yeah, they're buoyant. They're still buoyant. Hindi pa to yung ano talaga
No, when they're flying kasi talagang makikita mo ang katawan ganito. Pero ang gaan. Yun ang gusto ko.
Ang hahaba ng ibon.
I think I like birds.
Kasi yung sa amin,
Talaga.
ang liliit.
Oo. I think I like birds that are, personally, mas gusto ko yung medyo deeper on the keel.
Yeah.
And then longer. Kasi
Long-casted.
I think these are, personal opinion ko, observation ko, mas may tibay. Pakiramdam ko lang, mas may tibay.
Tsaka, yung sinasabi ko, hindi one pintail, pero nakaganyan na. Like,
There's
not
sound.
really like this.
There's sound. Because
But there's
you-
sound like,
oo,
ganyan. They never, you know.
Look at this one. This is a hen. She's a bit big, but you can see that she's very buoyant.
Oh my
And she's not
God.
even flying yet.
You gotta hold this bird. Ito pag hinawakan mo to.
Sabihin mo.
Pero again, pag lumilipad na sila kasi,
There you go, bro.
talagang ano na, yung gumagaan na sila. Siyempre pag ganito, hindi lumilipad, talagang bibigat. So, medyo, I think this is the daughter of the first overall.
Ano feeds nila ngayon, bro? Sabi mo?
It's a mix of that and the purative.
Oh, minimix mo yung dalawa.
Now I
You
give
get
them
that
about...
feather called.
Oh yeah?
Really? Okay.
Yun, tinan natin. Yeah.
Ang ganda eh. Kala ko hindi mo hinahawakan, kaya...
No. Kasi lagi kong tinatanong, si ganito, si ganyan, lagi hinahawakan. At saka makita mo, pag hindi hinahawakan na even, pag hawak mo,
Nagwawala.
hindi kasi sanay eh. Sanay sila lahat. But iba kasi, when they compete, pag naglalaban na, iba na mga katawan nila eh. Kung minsan kasi, yan ang isang paraan din para nakikita ko kung paano pag-aalaga. Lunes, ganito pa lang ang katawan. Pagdating ng Miyerkules, ganito na. Pagdating ng Biyernes, ganito ang katawan. Ganun ang gusto namin.
Do you feed pellets?
Yeah, I do. I
Even
have
race?
Yep. That's very important, but we only give that in the morning.
Not on arrival?
Arrival.
Okay.
That's basically the food we give pag dumating. But this is mixed with what I call the turbo seeds.
Okay.
The pellet is very important because this is high calorie pellet. The main component here is egg yolk. So it's high calorie, and it's very important because
That's
it's
the
very
arrival.
very easy to digest. And pag arrival, walang turbo seeds. Basically, that's the sneaky mix.
It's like a candy mix in Southern California. Candy mix.
So when in competition, ang inuuwian lang nila would be this one. We call it the nutrition pellets. Kasi ito high calorie, ang daming, there's egg yolk, there's spirulina, and we don't want to tax the digestive system of the bird, so we give them highly digestible but high calorie feeds, and high protein, so that they can easily recover on the muscle.
Do you give that on training?
Training, not too much.
But do they digest the pellets right when they're racing?
Again, it's, there's different strategies in pigeon flying. There's also what we call nutritional strategy, and this is how we strategize in terms of feeding. We have to give the right kind of feeds or the right type of feeds depending on the day and on the need of the bird. But I tend to focus on, I would call it high dense feeds, so that I don't tax the digestive system of the bird any further than what's necessary. So for example, especially on arrival day where they're really stressed and their digestive system is really compromised, I give them highly digestible protein pellets, so that basically they just
recover
eat it,
faster?
they recover easily. Monday morning you see the birds, they're really okay already. But we don't let them fly yet. We usually fly them Tuesday because I want them to have total rest, so that they would have the opportunity for the muscles to recover.
So how many times you feed a day?
Twice?
Twice.
Yeah, but in the morning we only feed them a small portion of the whole portion of the day.
Before loft fly or?
Yeah, before loft fly.
Before loft fly.
No. It's after.
After loft fly.
After
Yeah.
loft fly.
Okay.
Even drinking is after loft fly.
How many loft fly do you do every day?
Twice?
Twice.
2 times, yeah. Morning and afternoon.
Wow.
And the more important one would be the one in the morning. Usually when they're really up and about and we're really priming them already for the competition, the birds on their own and willingly should fly easily 1 hour. But that depends also on the area. But here in this area, it's easier for us to get that 1 hour because there's not many obstructions here. There's not many areas where they can land. Especially the males, when they start, calling on the females. So we also separate males and females when we loft fly.
Yeah, because the cocks goes down when
And that's the
they see
problem
the hands.
with boys.
Yeah.
It's hard to control the boys when the libido is, really,
Yeah.
So again,
I think sabi ko sa'yo, the loft, there's no draft. Hindi close.
there has to be control.
Yeah.
Parang kapag malakas ang hangin, number one, ito kinokontrol na niya ng konti. And then, dito may control ulit ng konti. Tapos, nandoon sa dulo. Tapos, kung gusto naming, halimbawa, mainit talaga, we can decide to either open this para may extra release yung hot air, or we can open that para talagang direct suction. So, very important kasi ang ventilation sa ano mo. So, dito sa loft ko, laging tuyo yan. Laging tuyo. Ito, ginagamit lang namin pag laban na. We don't use a lot of with the hood system.
You motivate your birds?
A little, but they're motivated as is, you know, because I think if they like and they're comfortable in their loft, they would come home. So this is used only during the latter stages of competition, but in the earlier stages, no.
Wow.
What's important is every bird would have their own perch. They don't have to compete for their safe place. They
have to fight for
their space
territory,
in the loft. Kasi yun ang pinakamahirap pag yung birds would always be fighting against each other. Ang hirap nilang mag-condition because they're in constant stress. Kailangan after kumain, alam na nila kung saan sila, hindi na sila nag-aaway, komportable sila. That's very important.
Hey bro, Manny. So,
Hey.
how did you start with racing pigeons?
Okay. I think my story, in as far as pigeon racing is concerned, or pigeon hobby is concerned, is very similar to most, where we start with when we were still young, and our parents, or my lola, for example, would buy pigeons, and usually for consumption, and I would take those pigeons and keep them somewhere because I would like to keep them, and basically that's how it started. But I started competing professionally in 2011, I think. You know, so it's
Nice.
also been a long time already.
It's long, yeah. And you are very well known to the pigeon racing in the Philippines.
Not really.
So, how do you do it? What's the tips or secret to success?
Okay. Well, it's not easy putting everything in context where you would enumerate certain steps, but I would say it requires a lot of common sense. And definitely, I think if there's one thing that people need to remember in this hobby is that they should always be conscious, or they should focus on the 4 pillars, which again, that's genetics, in my opinion, which is the most important. Of course, you have to have good management, nutrition, of course, and health. Now, in each aspect, there's a lot of things that needs consideration, but at the end of the day, common sense, really, common sense.
Nice.
That can make the big difference. And of course, you have to have the time to really focus in such a manner where at least you should know the condition of the birds, and especially during races where it becomes very vital that you're constantly updated and aware of how the birds are looking and whether they're in their peak form during competition.
Okay. So, did you have mentors when you started?
That's interesting. To be totally honest, maybe I'm more of a talker than a listener. So, no, but unfortunately, I didn't have a mentor. No, but I was fortunate to have had the exposure in genetics and nutrition for a long time, because I worked for a genetic company for maybe a combined 15 years, and in animal nutrition for about 3 years. So I think that's the most important in as far as my background, that allowed me to be in the position that I'm in this time.
Okay. So, what is your main bloodline in your loft?
You know, that's a very good question, but at the same time, I cannot answer that specifically, because I would prefer that I focus on the type of bird rather than the line.
Okay.
Bloodlines, you know, just to be quick, I think it's important for you to be able to establish a baseline if we're talking of a baseline, I think I would still say that the base of the birds I started with would have the Vandenbroek line, because that's most popular in the Philippines, and of course it's more accessible for me that time. At the same time, in as far as the track record of this family of birds working well in the Philippines under Philippine conditions, I think it's no one can contest that even up to now the Vandenbroeks are doing well.
Okay.
So that's the base. But from there, again, I work on the type of bird and bring in the birds that I think would complement the type of birds that I like.
So you still add birds to your
Oh, definitely.
breeding loft?
If there's one thing constant in my loft, I always am very particular on continuous improvement.
Okay.
I really believe that we cannot stop improving.
Okay. So for you, what is your definition of a super pigeon?
What? These are hard questions. Super pigeon, one that is healthy. I think a super pigeon is a bird that rarely gets sick. I think that's a very
Rarely get sick.
rarely gets sick. In fact,
Or never get sick.
maybe even never.
Yeah.
Maybe even
Okay.
never. For example, my oldest foundation cock, Blue Hole, I don't remember if he's ever sick.
Ah,
From when he was
when
young.
he was racing.
No, that's a good
Wow.
point. I don't remember him getting sick at all. Even my champion birds, no. But I think I need to qualify that because, especially during the time, we're talking of like 5-6 years ago, the challenge on the young bird sickness, which we actually call adeno here, seems more rampant during those times. So there were a lot of incidences where, especially during the time when all the young birds are mixed together on tosses and all that, where lofts are getting infected left and right.
Yeah.
I've had 4 straight seasons where I would have that problem as well. Of course, I would have birds getting sick, and I'm not quite sure if those birds that eventually became winners, did get sick, but
Their immunity is.
it's definitely much better
Yeah.
because it plays a very important role in their overall robustness and vigor. And I think this is very important in winning the race, especially here in the Philippines, where it's really the stresses are really high.
High. Yeah. And how do you deal with sickness? Do you medicate your birds, or once the bird gets sick, do you call birds, or do you medicate them?
I medicate when it's still feasible to do that. When I say feasible, it doesn't cause any long-term damages, because at the end of the day, my goal is always to be able to get the next. My goal has always been to be able to find the next great breeder. So if whatever I do, it cannot compromise that goal, because it's useless if I can make a bird well, but damage the liver or things similar, which makes that bird basically useless for breeding. So I will never compromise that.
Okay.
So I would medicate if I still can, but I would rather do a program or plan on trying to avoid having to medicate rather than just do
Prevention.
Yep, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
So you medicate before. Is that part of your program, medication? So you medicate your young birds?
I don't know if you'd believe me, but last year I never had to medicate my bird.
Ah.
Yep. But as I mentioned to you a while ago, I did try to find. I found some good supplements or remedies. For example, I did use the Herbots Yellow Drop. That's actually very useful. And I also try to improve or prepare them in such a way that I think they're generally, especially on the health aspect, I can say that they would have a better immune system, of course, probiotics,
Yeah.
and some immune booster supplements.
Okay. How about one loft races? How do you select birds to send to one loft races?
That's a tricky question, but
Yeah.
we did mention a while ago that we have to be conscious of different horses for different courses. And so, for example, if we're talking of Victoria Falls, which I compete in, and Pattaya, these are definitely two different horses we're talking about. So, I think the type of birds that fly well in the Philippines can do very well in Victoria Falls. But for us to be able to become very competitive in Pattaya, which focuses heavily on fast birds, I think, but still having the right type of birds. As I mentioned to you a while ago, this year I invested heavily on genetics, which I think can do very well for Pattaya.
Okay.
So these are two different type of birds. So again, different horses for different courses.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what characteristic do you look for birds when adding to your loft?
Okay.
Do you have to hold the birds in your hands, or you look for pedigree?
Both.
Both.
Any information or anything that I can use to better assess the bird is definitely considered. Because there's no one absolute way for us to be able to really find that exceptional bird, or at least we hope that bird would turn out to be. So definitely, and the most initial would be on phenotype. So I look for certain traits, which I think can work very well for us here. We talked about buoyancy, we talked about the structure, we talked about the wing type. Those are very important to me. I even look as far as the ratio of the primary to the secondaries, because I think those add to the overall efficiency of the bird as a flyer. And since these are athletes, these things needs to be considered. And then of course we look at the pedigree. Pedigree, we look at how deep or how far the champions are in that pedigree. You know, not just, you know, if I can
Like
afford,
great granddaughter, grandson, yeah.
I'd like to try to buy, and in my loft, what I use are direct brothers of winners, winners themselves, producers of winners, full brothers and sisters of winners, or that close. If we're talking of cousins, we're talking of direct children of producers. But again, the most important in your loft, in my opinion, is what I would consider, or what I would call, the genetic merits of a bird, and the most or the highest points I would give to a bird that produces the good producers of winners. Flyers are good. They're, you know, flyers. Everybody, you know, would like to have winners in their loft. But I think what's the most important is to be able to find the breeders of the good breeders. That's the most important. We're talking of prepotency.
Okay. So, if someone wants to buy from your best breeders, would you sell young birds from them?
Normally what I sell are my finishers.
The finishers.
The ones that or the ones that finish the race. Whether it be, you know, whether they fly 2 points, 3 points, but I would prefer, because that's also my way of selecting my future breeders. Because I don't breed to sell. So in a year, it is very rare for, I actually don't do this. I breed birds extra so that I would have birds for sale. I don't do that. I would only breed a few from my best breeders, because they're actually planned. There's a plan, because I always try to plan ahead in terms of my breeding, usually 2 to 3 years ahead, so that, you know, I try to establish what I need for next year and the year after that.
Wow.
For example, case in point.
You're ahead of the game.
Well, maybe, I don't know, but this is just my way of thinking. Like, because age of the hen is very important for me. When I have a prepotent hen that produced a winner already, and for example, that hen I know I would only be using for maximum 5 years of her time, So I start using that hen in her second year. So technically I would only have about 3 years to assess that hen. If a hen proves to be a very good breeder, really, that's able to produce a good flyer, or at least one that constantly finishes the race, no? What I would do is that on the 3rd year of that hen, I would already breed a full sister of that hen. Because that full sister would only become available and in her prime after 2 years.
Yeah.
So that 3rd year, that hen, I know she would be retired in her 5th year. So when she's retired, I would already have another full sister of the same merit available and in her prime on the 2nd year. Or, yeah.
Okay.
So that's how I do it. So even now, for example, if you look into my stock loft, there's very few that you can find that are actually bred for that purpose. And normally these birds that I breed for this purpose are coming from, definitely from the older ones already. Because I don't keep stock birds from very young cocks or very young hens.
Okay.
For example, in the case of Dream, Conquer Dream, well, he produced winners upon winners already. So obviously those birds are put to stock.
Yeah.
Pero anything that's, he keeping a progeny from Conquer Dream that's not from proven breeding, I don't have any at my loft at this time.
So do you believe in golden pair?
Yeah, but they do have limitations because, again, okay, golden pair in terms of being able to produce winners or being able to produce winners, yes, but only a certain period of time, because the robustness of the progenies of the older hens fades.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking too.
It cannot last for long.
Okay.
And I have figures and I have numbers to prove that that is correct.
Okay.
Because everything is recorded.
Wow.
Everything is recorded, so I know that, when a hen, for example, this bird that does very well, what's the age of the hen, what's the age of the cock, and then next year, if that pair still produces well, and when you see a depletion in the quality or the winnability of the children, it can always almost refer back to whether the hen is getting older or whether the hen got sick the previous year. It will have an effect.
Okay. Alright.
But no matter the age, the genetic merit of a bird remains because it does not change the genetic composition. So for breeding, even if, for example, a hen is already at 7 or 8 years old, if the purpose of that breeding is for stock, then it doesn't matter. And that's the reason why in my loft you can only find, let's say, for example, if I have 40 hens, maybe I would have 5 hens older than 6 years old.
Wow.
But these are the golden ones. Because these are the ones that really put, in fact, the people who know me best want those hens. Because they know that those hens will not stay in my loft that long if they have not produced well. Because
so they will die here.
Oh, well, we don't say that.
Oh, sorry. But yeah.
Yeah. I've learned early on that in the sport, they're not pets. They're athletes.
Yeah.
So you have to treat them like that.
Yeah.
And I'm very different when it comes to companion animals. When you're talking of dogs and cats, they're like my children. They sleep with me. They have their own room. But in pigeons, it's a totally different discipline. I don't like freeloaders in my loft. They have to go. And I will not, because, the thing that sometimes they say, if it didn't perform in your loft, maybe it can perform in somebody else's loft. I don't believe in that.
Okay. I got a good question for you, man. So, what is your greatest achievement in pigeon racing?
Internationally, I would say it's still, being able to fly third in Victoria Falls.
Okay.
In the final race, our pigeon flew in. There were only 3 daybirds that time, and in Victoria Falls last year.
Wow.
There were only 3 daybirds, and our
third was yours.
Yeah.
Wow.
Locally, we're quite fortunate and blessed. We've had many good wins,
Okay. Ah.
and I take a lot of pleasure in being able to produce solo winners. Those birds
In the
that
club.
in the club.
Yeah.
Because I select heavy on that aspect. I like birds that would have that extra will, if you would want to put it.
Come on.
And I strongly believe that this is also dictated by the genetics in them, which we can't do anything about. If it's not in them, it's not there.
Yeah.
I like birds that would have that innate ability to fly on their own if they have to, and go beyond the normal, which is, the normal instinct for birds is to stay in the flock. And I think for hard terrains like the Philippines, where we have a lot of hard races, smash races, heavy rains, heavy all, it's very important that that bird would have that certain trait in them that would push that bird to do the extra mile, or to do that, that she would fly even without the others, or she would take a left, or he would take a right if the others would go all left
Full
and right.
break.
Yeah, exactly, that's the word. So we've had in 2021, I think, my 2K bird for the North Derby races won the solo clocker for the 2K band.
Uh-huh.
And then we've
Is
had
it a breakaway bird when he won the solo?
well, there's only 2 clockers that day for the young bird.
Okay.
That's live.
Wow.
So those I like those birds. So I select heavy on that.
All right. So, do you have any tips for a newbie or a guy who's just starting in racing pigeons?
Okay. In this sport, I think you do a lot of you need to do a lot of self-study. And there's a lot of material already that's available in the web. If you can find somebody who's willing to share the experience and the learnings that they've had, that's a great asset, or that's a great advantage to you. But it takes a lot of common sense as well. Try to read between the lines, When somebody says it's black, it does not necessarily mean it's all black, There's a lot of things that you need to be able to digest and absorb. And at the end of the day, what differentiates a good pigeon racer from one that wins a lot is that it's that extra that you have in you to be able to go the extra mile in being able to, okay, everyone wants to just drink up and all that, and then you're in the loft looking at your pigeons. I think those things matter.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Paulo.
Appreciate you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Woo.